My wife Willow rejected my marriage proposal twice. The first time, she laughed it off like I was joking. The second time, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "Daniel, you're sweet, but I need someone with ambition. Someone who can match my energy." I smiled, nodded, and never brought it up again. I stayed by her side anyway, playing the role of the dependable best friend while she chased after men who treated her like an option. I watched her cry over guys who didn't deserve her, listened to her vent about her failed relationships, and every single time, I was there to pick up the pieces. I told myself that one day, she'd see me differently. That one day, she'd realize I was the one who truly loved her. But that day never came. Instead, she kept me in the friend zone, comfortable and safe, while she explored every other possibility. I was her emotional support, her late-night confidant, her go-to person when life got hard. But I was never her choice. Then everything changed. Willow's father, Mr. Carter, a self-made billionaire who built his empire from nothing, called me into his office one afternoon. I thought maybe he wanted to discuss business or ask for a favor. Instead, he looked at me with tired eyes and said, "Daniel, I'm getting old. I've been watching you for years. You're loyal, hardworking, and you've got integrity. My daughter doesn't see it, but I do. I'm naming you the sole heir to my estate." I sat there, frozen, unable to process what I'd just heard. Before I could even respond, he continued, "She's going to panic when she finds out. But I need someone I can trust to carry on my legacy, and that someone is you. Not her." The moment the news reached Willow, everything shifted. Suddenly, the girl who rejected me twice, who kept me at arm's length for years, was calling me nonstop. Showing up at my door. Texting me paragraphs about how she'd made a mistake. How she'd always had feelings for me but was just scared. How we should give us a real chance. I watched her desperation unfold, and for the first time, I didn't feel anything. No anger. No satisfaction. Just emptiness. Because I knew the truth. She didn't want me. She wanted what I now had. And when Mr. Carter sat me down and formally offered me everything, I looked him in the eye and said the one thing no one expected: I decline. I met Willow Carter when we were both 19 years old, fresh-faced college students trying to figure out life. She was the kind of girl who walked into a room and immediately commanded attention. Not because she was loud or over the top, but because she had this presence about her: confidence, ambition, a fire in her eyes that said she knew exactly what she wanted and wasn't afraid to go after it. I, on the other hand, was the quiet guy who sat in the back of the class. The one who kept his head down, worked hard, and didn't make waves. I came from a middle-class family. My parents were good, hard-working people, but we didn't have money or connections. I was at that university on a scholarship, and I knew I had to make every single second count because I didn't have a safety net to fall back on. Willow and I ended up in the same study group during our sophomore year. At first, I didn't think much of her beyond the fact that she was smart, driven, and had a sharp sense of humor. But she also had this wall around her. She didn't let people in easily, didn't trust quickly, and seemed to keep everyone at a careful distance. Over time, though, we became friends. Real friends. We'd stay up late studying together, grab coffee between classes, and talk about our dreams and ambitions. She wanted to take over her father's company one day and build it into something even bigger than it already was. I wanted to create something of my own, to prove that I could succeed without anyone's help or handouts. Somewhere along the way, without even realizing it was happening, I fell for her. It wasn't one big dramatic moment. It was 1,000 small ones. The way she'd throw her head back and laugh at my terrible jokes. The way she'd call me in the middle of the night when she was stressed and just needed someone to listen. The way she'd look at me sometimes, with this softness in her eyes, and I'd think maybe, just maybe, she felt the same way I did, so I took a chance. It was junior year, right before winter break. We were sitting in her car after a long, exhausting day of finals, and the words just came tumbling out before I could stop them. "Willow, I like you. Really like you. I think we could be great together." She didn't say anything at first, just stared at me with this completely unreadable expression on her face. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might break through my chest. Then she smiled, but it wasn't the smile I was hoping for. It was the kind of smile you give someone when you're trying to let them down. Easy, when you feel bad, but you know you have to be honest. "Daniel, you're one of my best friends. I don't want to ruin that." I nodded quickly, swallowing the massive lump in my throat, and forced myself to smile. "Yeah, of course. No worries. I totally understand." But inside, I was absolutely crushed. My chest felt tight, my stomach twisted into knots, and I wanted nothing more than to disappear. Still, I didn't walk away. I told myself that maybe she just needed time, that maybe if I stayed close, if I proved myself, she'd eventually see me the way I saw her, so I stayed. I was there when she started dating a guy named Marcus, some finance bro who talked a big game but had absolutely nothing to back it up. I was there when he cheated on her with some girl from his office, and she cried on my shoulder for hours, mascara running down her face. I was there when she dated a guy named Eric, who turned out to be more interested in her father's money and connections than he ever was in her. And I was there when that relationship crashed and burned, too. Every single time, I was the one she turned to, the one she trusted, the one she relied on when everything else fell apart, but never, not once, was I the one she actually chose. Then, 2 years after my first attempt, I tried again. We were at a mutual friend's wedding, and she looked so incredibly beautiful that night in a dress that took my breath away. We danced together, we laughed until our sides hurt, and for just a moment, it felt like maybe things had changed between us. Maybe enough time had passed. Maybe she was finally ready. So, I asked her again, my voice hopeful but my hands shaking. Willow, I know you said no before. But I still feel the same way about you. I think we could be really, really happy together. This time, she didn't smile at all. She just looked at me with something that almost seemed like pity in her eyes and said, Daniel, you're sweet. You really are. But I need someone with ambition. Someone who can match my energy and push me to be better. You're comfortable, you're safe, and I need more than that. That was the exact moment I finally realized the horrible truth I'd been avoiding for years. She didn't see me as an equal. She didn't see me as someone worthy of being with her. She saw me as safe, as the backup plan, as the guy who would always be there waiting no matter how badly she treated me or how many times she chose someone else. So I stopped trying. I stopped hoping. I stopped waiting for her to wake up one day and suddenly see me differently. I stayed her friend because I didn't know how not to be, but I built walls of my own this time. Thick, high walls that I swore I'd never let down again. I focused completely on my career. On building something real for myself. I worked my way up in the business world, made smart investments, took calculated risks, and slowly but surely started gaining respect in circles that actually mattered. I didn't do it to impress her. I didn't do it to prove her wrong. I did it for me, because I finally understood that I deserved better than spending my entire life chasing someone who would never want me back. But Mr. Carter noticed everything. Willow's father and I had crossed paths several times over the years at various events and gatherings. He knew I was close to his daughter, and he'd always been kind and respectful to me. But it wasn't until recently that we started having real, substantial conversations about business, about life, about what really mattered. He'd invite me to high-level business events, ask for my opinion on major deals, and treat me like someone whose thoughts and ideas were actually worth listening to. I never asked him for anything. I never tried to use my connection to Willow to get ahead or gain favors. I never played that game, and I think that's exactly why he respected me so much. One day, completely out of the blue, Mr. Carter called me directly and asked me to come to his office. I thought maybe he wanted some advice on a project or needed help with something business-related. But instead, he sat me down in one of those expensive leather chairs across from his massive desk, and said something that would change my entire life. Daniel, I'm getting old. I've built this company from absolutely nothing, poured my heart and soul into it for decades, and I need to make sure it's in the right hands when I'm gone. I didn't say anything at all. I just sat there and listened, my mind racing to figure out where this conversation was going. He continued, his voice steady and serious. I've been watching you for a very long time now. You're loyal to your core. You work harder than anyone I know. You don't ask for handouts or favors. You remind me so much of myself when I was younger, before I had anything, when I was just trying to prove I belonged. I still had absolutely no idea where he was going with all of this, and my heart was starting to pound in my chest. Then he said the words that completely changed everything, the words I never in a million years expected to hear. I'm naming you the sole heir to my entire estate. Everything I've built, everything I own, it's going to be yours. I just stared at him, completely and utterly speechless. My mouth opened, but no words came out. Sir, I finally managed to choke out. I don't understand. What about Willow? What about your daughter? He let out a long, heavy sigh, leaned back in his chair, and rubbed his tired eyes. Willow is my daughter, and I love her more than anything in this world. But she's not ready for this kind of responsibility. She's impulsive. She chases the wrong things, gets involved with the wrong people. She doesn't understand the real value of loyalty or hard work because she's never actually had to struggle for anything in her entire life. Everything has always been handed to her on a silver platter. You, though. You understand. You've earned everything you have. And that's exactly why I'm choosing you. I didn't know what to say to that. I couldn't wrap my head around it. This was insane. He wasn't just offering me a job or a promotion. He was offering me everything. His entire legacy. But he was completely serious, and when the official announcement was made to the family and the board, everything exploded. The day the news got out, my phone absolutely exploded with notifications. Texts. Calls. Voicemails. Emails. Most of them were from people I hadn't heard from in years. Suddenly wanting to reconnect and catch up, and act like we'd always been close friends. But the messages that stood out the most, the ones that made my stomach turn, were from Willow. The first text came at 7 o'clock in the morning, before I'd even had my coffee. "Daniel, we need to talk. Call me as soon as you get this." I ignored it, and went about my morning routine. Then another message came through an hour later. "Daniel, seriously. This is really important. We need to discuss what's happening." Then another one shortly after that. "Why aren't you answering me? Did I do something wrong?" By noon, she had called me 6 times in a row. I didn't pick up once. I knew exactly what this was about, and I wasn't ready to deal with her or the inevitable conversation we were going to have. Finally, around 3 in the afternoon, she just showed up at my apartment without any warning. I opened the door to find her standing there in the hallway, looking absolutely frantic. Her hair was messier than usual, her eyes were wide and almost panicked, her hands were fidgeting nervously with her phone. "Daniel," she said, pushing past me and stepping inside without even waiting for an invitation. "We need to talk right now." I closed the door slowly and crossed my arms over my chest, leaning against the wall. "About what, exactly?" She stared at me like I'd just said the most ridiculous thing she'd ever heard in her entire life. "About what? Are you serious right now? About my father naming you his heir? About the fact that he's giving you absolutely everything? About the fact that my entire future just got handed to someone else?" I shrugged, keeping my voice calm and even. "What about it? It's his decision to make, not mine." Her jaw literally dropped open. She looked at me like I'd completely lost my mind. "What about it? Daniel, that's my inheritance. That's my family's company. That's my entire future we're talking about, and he just handed it all to you like it's nothing." I stayed completely calm, refusing to let her see how much this was affecting me. "He made his decision, Willow. It's not my place to question it or argue with him about it. If you have a problem with what he's doing, you should take it up with your father, not with me." She let out a laugh. But there was absolutely no humor in it whatsoever. It was bitter and harsh. "You're seriously just okay with this? You're just going to take everything that should be mine and act like it's no big deal? Like you deserve it?" I looked her directly in the eye, holding her gaze without flinching. "I didn't ask for any of this, Willow. Your father made this choice completely on his own. I had nothing to do with it. If you have a problem with his decision, that's between you and him. Don't put this on me." She shook her head, clearly frustrated and desperate. "Daniel, come on. You and I both know this doesn't make any sense at all. You're not family. You're not even operating at his level in the business world. Why would he possibly choose you over his own daughter? His own flesh and blood?" I stayed silent, watching her carefully. She stepped closer to me, and her voice softened, taking on an almost pleading tone. "Look, I know we've had our ups and downs over the years. I know things have been complicated between us. But we've been friends for so long. You care about me, right? You always have." I didn't answer. I just kept watching her, waiting to see where she was going with this. She continued, her voice getting quieter and more intimate. "Maybe my dad sees something between us. Maybe he thinks we're eventually going to end up together. And that's why he's doing this whole thing. Maybe he wants to make sure you're taken care of because he thinks we'll get married someday, and it'll all stay in the family anyway." Something twisted painfully in my chest. Anger. Disappointment. Disgust. A horrible mixture of all three. "So that's what this is really about," I said, my voice coming out cold and hard. "You think if you play nice now, if you suddenly pretend like there's something romantic between us, I'll just hand everything over to you? Is that your plan?" Her face flushed red. "That's not what I meant at all. Isn't it, though?" I asked, stepping closer and forcing her to look at me. "Because it's funny how the exact moment your father names me his heir, you suddenly start caring about me again. Really funny how that timing works out." She opened her mouth to argue, to defend herself, but I cut her off before she could get a single word out. "You rejected me twice, Willow. Twice. You made it crystal clear that I wasn't good enough for you. That I didn't have enough ambition. That I was too comfortable, too safe. Too boring. And now, all of a sudden, you want to talk about us. You want to pretend like there's always been something there. Tears started welling up in her eyes, and her voice shook when she spoke. Daniel, I made a mistake. I was stupid and blind. I didn't see what was right in front of me all those years. I let out a harsh, bitter laugh that surprised even me. No. You saw exactly what was in front of you. You just didn't want it. You didn't want me. And now that I have something you desperately want, now you're trying to rewrite our entire history and pretend like you always cared. She wiped at her eyes, her voice breaking completely. That's not fair to say. Isn't it? I asked, my voice rising slightly. Because from where I'm standing, this has absolutely nothing to do with me as a person. It has everything to do with what I now represent. With what I now have access to. She didn't say anything. Just stood there, staring at me with this mixture of desperation, frustration, and something that might have been genuine hurt. I took a deep breath, trying my absolute hardest to keep my emotions under control. Look, Willow. I cared about you. For a very long time, I cared about you way more than I should have. But I'm done now. I'm completely done being your backup plan. I'm done being the guy you run to when everything else falls apart with someone else. She reached out suddenly and grabbed my hand tightly. Daniel, please. Don't do this. Don't throw away everything we've had. I pulled my hand away from hers like her touch burned me. I'm not doing anything. Your father made his choice. And now I'm making mine. Her eyes went impossibly wide. What does that mean? What are you talking about? I looked directly at her, my voice steady and absolutely certain. It means I'm declining the inheritance. I don't want it. Her face went completely pale, all the color draining out in an instant. You're what? You can't be serious. I repeated myself, speaking slower this time, so there was absolutely no confusion. I'm declining it. I don't want his money or his company or any of it. She stared at me like I had completely and totally lost my mind. Daniel, do you have any idea how much money we're talking about here? How much power? How much influence? This could set you up for life. Multiple lives. Your children's children would never have to work. Yeah, I said simply. I do know. And I still don't want it. She grabbed my arm desperately, her voice becoming frantic and almost hysterical. Why? Why would you possibly turn it down? This doesn't make any sense. I looked her dead in the eye and told her the complete truth. Because it's not mine to take. It was never mine. And because I'm not going to let your father use me as some kind of pawn to teach you a lesson about life. This is between you and him, and I want no part of it. Her grip on my arm loosened and slowly fell away. I stepped back, putting distance between us. I'm sorry, Willow. But I'm done playing whatever game this is. And with that, I walked past her, grabbed my jacket, and left my own apartment, leaving her standing there in complete and utter shocked silence. The days that followed my decision were incredibly strange. I had expected to feel relief, maybe even a sense of pride for standing my ground and doing what I thought was right, but instead, I just felt hollow. Empty. Like I'd just walked away from something much bigger and more important than I fully realized. The truth was that declining Mr. Carter's inheritance wasn't just about rejecting Willow and her sudden fake interest in me. It was about rejecting a version of myself that I didn't want to become. A version that took shortcuts. That accepted things I hadn't earned through my own hard work. That let someone else's expectations and plans dictate my entire future. I'd spent my entire life working incredibly hard, building something real from absolutely nothing. And yeah, maybe I wasn't a billionaire. Maybe I didn't have the same level of massive success as Mr. Carter. But what I did have, I had earned with my own two hands, and that mattered to me more than anything else possibly could. Still, the decision weighed heavily on me every single day. Because deep down, I knew exactly what I was walking away from. Security for the rest of my life. Influence in circles I'd never otherwise have access to. Respect from people who would never have given me a second glance before. The kind of life that most people only dream about and never come close to achieving. And I'd just said no to all of it. My phone kept buzzing constantly. Willow, mostly, but also Mr. Carter himself. I ignored both of them completely. I needed space. Time to think. Time to figure out what the hell I was actually doing with my life and where I was supposed to go from here. But Willow absolutely refused to give up. She kept trying over and over again. She'd show up at my apartment completely unannounced at all hours. She'd send me long, emotional, rambling texts about how sorry she was. How she'd made terrible mistakes. How she wanted desperately to fix things between us. At first, I almost believed her. Almost let myself think that maybe she really meant it this time. But then I'd remember the exact look in her eyes, when she first found out about the inheritance. The panic. The desperation. The cold calculation happening behind those eyes. And I'd remember that this wasn't about me at all. It never had been. It was about control. About making absolutely sure she didn't lose what she'd always believed was rightfully hers. One night, she showed up at my door again. This time, she looked different than before. Softer. More vulnerable. Like she'd been crying for hours and hours. "Daniel," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please. Just hear me out. Just give me 5 minutes." I sighed heavily and stepped aside, letting her into my apartment. She sat down on my couch, wrapping her arms tightly around herself like she was trying physically to hold herself together. "I know you don't believe me," she started, her voice shaking. "I know you think this is all about the money and the inheritance. But it's not. I swear to you it's not." I didn't say anything. Just stood there and waited for her to continue. She looked up at me, and her eyes were red and puffy from crying. "I was scared, Daniel. I've been scared this whole time. Scared of how strongly I felt about you. Scared of what it would mean if we tried to be together and it didn't work out. You were my best friend in the entire world. I didn't want to lose that." I crossed my arms over my chest. "So instead you kept me around as a backup plan while you dated everyone else." She physically flinched like I'd slapped her. "That's not what I was doing." "Then what were you doing, exactly?" I asked, my voice sharper than I really intended it to be. Because from where I'm standing, that's exactly what it looks like. What it's always looked like. She shook her head violently, tears streaming down her face. "I was selfish. I was stupid and immature. I didn't realize what I had, what I was throwing away, until it was way too late." I let out another bitter laugh. "Yeah, well. That seems to be a pretty consistent pattern with you, doesn't it?" She stood up suddenly and stepped closer to me, her voice pleading. "Daniel, I know I don't deserve another chance. I know I hurt you badly. But I'm asking anyway. Please. Just give me one more chance to prove myself." I looked at her, really looked at her carefully. And for just a moment, for one brief second, I almost caved, almost let myself believe her. But then I remembered something Mr. Carter had said to me during our conversation. She chases the wrong things, the wrong people. She doesn't understand the value of loyalty because she's never had to work for it. And he was absolutely right. Because even now, even as she stood here begging me with tears running down her face, I couldn't shake the horrible feeling that this wasn't real. That if the inheritance had never happened in the first place, she wouldn't be here at all. She'd still be out there dating other guys and keeping me firmly in the friend zone where I'd always been. I took a deliberate step back, putting space between us. "I can't do this, Willow. I just can't." Her face completely crumpled. "Why not? What more do I have to do?" "Because I don't trust you," I said quietly but firmly. "And without trust, there's absolutely nothing left to build on." She opened her mouth to argue, to say something else, but I held up my hand to stop her. "I'm done, Willow. I'm done with this. With us. With all of it. We're finished." She stared at me for a long moment, tears streaming silently down her face, and for a second I thought she was going to keep fighting. Keep pushing. But instead, she just nodded slowly, wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, and walked out of my apartment without another word, and this time, she didn't come back. The silence that followed was absolutely deafening. I should have felt relieved. Free. Like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. But instead, I just felt completely empty inside. Because the truth was that I had loved her. Really. Truly loved her with everything I had. And walking away from that, even when I knew deep down it was the right thing to do, hurt more than I ever thought possible. I threw myself completely into my work. Long hours that stretched into the night. Late nights that turned into early mornings. Anything and everything to keep my mind occupied and stop thinking about her. But no matter how busy I kept myself, how many projects I took on, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just lost something incredibly important. Not Willow herself. Not the inheritance or the money. But the version of myself who still believed in second chances. Who still believed that people could genuinely change. I started questioning absolutely everything about my life. My choices. My values. My future. Had I made the right call turning down the inheritance? Or had I just thrown away the opportunity of a lifetime because of stupid pride? I didn't have an answer to that question. And that scared me more than anything else. Because for the first time in my entire life, I genuinely didn't know what I was supposed to do next or where I was supposed to go from here. 2 weeks after I declined the inheritance, I received a call from Mr. Carter's personal assistant. Her voice was professional and crisp as always. "Mr. Carter would like to meet with you," she said. "Tomorrow morning. 10 o'clock sharp." I hesitated, my finger hovering over the end call button. I'd been avoiding him just like I'd been avoiding Willow. But something in her tone told me this wasn't optional. This was important. Fine, I finally said. I'll be there. The next morning, I showed up at his office building right on time. The building was absolutely massive, all glass and steel and modern architecture, the kind of place that screamed power and money and success. I'd been there before several times, but it always felt surreal. Like I didn't really belong in a place like this. His assistant led me up to his private office on the top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city. Expensive original art hanging on the walls. A massive desk that probably cost more than my car. Mr. Carter was sitting behind it, and he looked older than I remembered, more tired, more worn down. "Daniel," he said, gesturing to the expensive leather chair across from him. "Please. Sit down." I sat, my hands folded in my lap. He studied me carefully for a long moment, his expression completely unreadable. Then he leaned back in his chair and let out a heavy sigh. "You declined the inheritance." It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir," I said simply. He nodded slowly, processing this. "Can I ask you why you turned it down?" I chose my words very carefully. Because it wasn't mine to take. I didn't earn it. I didn't build it. And I'm not going to accept something just because someone else thinks I should have it. He raised an eyebrow, and the corner of his mouth twitched slightly. "You're a very rare breed, Daniel. Most people would have taken the money and run without a second thought." I shrugged. "I'm not most people, sir." He actually chuckled softly at that. No, you're certainly not." There was a long pause where neither of us spoke. Then he leaned forward, his expression becoming more serious. "Willow came to see me. Talked to me for hours." I didn't respond, just waited. "She told me everything that happened between you two. That you turned her down flat." I stayed completely silent. He continued, his voice thoughtful. "She's absolutely devastated. She genuinely thinks she's lost you for good this time." "Good," I said. And the word came out harsher and colder than I intended. He looked genuinely surprised. "You don't really mean that, don't I?" I asked, meeting his eyes. "Because she didn't care about me at all until I suddenly had something she desperately wanted. And now that I've walked away from it, I'm absolutely sure she'll move on to the next guy who can give her what she's looking for. She always does." He frowned deeply. "You're angry." "Yeah," I said, my voice rising slightly. "I am angry. Because I wasted years of my life caring about someone who never cared about me back. Not really. Not in the way that matters." He leaned forward, his eyes locking directly onto mine. "You're wrong about her, Daniel." I blinked in surprise. "What?" "She did care about you," he said quietly but firmly. "She just didn't know how to show it properly." I let out a bitter laugh. "Right. That's why she rejected me twice and kept me in the friend zone for years." He sighed heavily. "My daughter is incredibly complicated, Daniel. She's been raised in a world where absolutely everyone wants something from her. Money. Connections. Status. Power. She learned very early on to keep people at arm's length. To protect herself from being used." I frowned, not understanding where he was going. "What are you trying to say?" "I'm saying," he continued carefully, "that when she met you, someone who genuinely didn't want anything from her, someone who just wanted her for who she was, she didn't know what to do with that. She didn't know how to handle it." I shook my head. "If that were actually true, she would have said yes when I asked her out." "Not if she was terrified," he said. "Not if she thought she'd somehow ruin it and lose you forever." I didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to process it. He leaned back again, his expression softening. "I made you my heir for a very specific reason, Daniel. And it wasn't just because I think you're capable and trustworthy. It was because I wanted to see exactly how my daughter would react to the situation." I stared at him, my mind racing. "You were testing her. Testing both of us." He nodded slowly. "I needed to know if she loved you for who you actually are as a person, or if she was just like everyone else in her life. Chasing money. Chasing power. Chasing status and nothing more. And," I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, "what did you find out?" He smiled, but it was a sad smile. "She failed the test completely. But you passed with flying colors." I didn't know how to respond to that at all. He continued, pulling open a drawer in his desk. "You walked away from everything, Daniel. From the money. From the power. From her. And you did it because you have genuine integrity. Real character. That's incredibly rare in this world." I looked down at my hands, not sure what to say. "So what happens now? What comes next?" He reached into his desk and pulled out a thick manila folder, sliding it across the polished surface toward me. Now, he said, his voice steady. I'm offering you something completely different. Something you'll actually have to earn. I opened the folder slowly. Inside were legal documents outlining a detailed business partnership. Not an inheritance. Not a handout. Not charity. A real, legitimate partnership between equals. I'm not giving you my company, he said clearly, but I am offering you a significant stake in it. You'll work for every single bit of it. Earn it through your own effort. Build it alongside me as a true partner. I looked up at him, absolutely stunned. Sir, I don't understand. Why would you do this? Because I genuinely believe in you, he said simply. And because I think you're exactly the kind of man who can help me build something even greater than what already exists. I stared at the documents, my heart pounding hard in my chest. This was different. This wasn't charity or favoritism. This was a real opportunity that I'd have to work incredibly hard for. This was something I could actually accept. He stood up, extending his hand across the desk. What do you say, Daniel? Are you in? I stared at his hand for a long moment, my mind racing through all the possibilities. Then I stood up and firmly shook his hand. I'm in, I said. Let's do this. He smiled broadly, genuine warmth in his eyes. I knew you would be. Welcome aboard, partner. The partnership changed absolutely everything about my life. Overnight, I went from being an outsider to being a key player in one of the most powerful and influential companies in the entire country. It wasn't handed to me on a silver platter. I worked for every single bit of it. Long, exhausting hours, high-stakes deals that made my heart race, pressure unlike anything I'd ever experienced before in my life, but I thrived under it. For the first time in my entire life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Like everything I'd been through had led me to this exact moment. Willow, on the other hand, completely spiraled. I heard through mutual friends and colleagues that she'd taken the news extremely hard, that she'd tried to confront her father multiple times, demanding to know why he'd chosen me over her, his own flesh and blood. But Mr. Carter stood absolutely firm. You need to prove yourself, he'd told her repeatedly. Just like Daniel did. Just like anyone else would have to. She didn't take it well at all. She threw herself desperately into work, trying to prove she was capable and deserving. But the harder she tried, the more she seemed to completely unravel. She started making mistakes. Bad decisions. Impulsive moves that cost the company significant money. And with each mistake, her father's disappointment grew deeper and more obvious. I tried not to care. Tried to focus entirely on my own work and responsibilities, but it was hard not to notice. Hard not to feel this strange mixture of pity and satisfaction watching her struggle. Then one night, very late, she showed up at my office. It was almost midnight. I was the only person left in the entire building, working on a major presentation. I looked up from my computer to find her standing in the doorway, and she looked absolutely terrible. Dark circles under her eyes like she hadn't slept in days. Hair messy and unkempt. Clothes wrinkled. Daniel, she said quietly, her voice hoarse. We need to talk. Please. There's nothing to talk about, Willow. Nothing at all. Please, she said, stepping inside uninvited. Just give me 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. I sighed heavily. Fine. 5 minutes and then you leave. She sat down slowly in the chair across from me, wringing her hands nervously in her lap. I messed up, she started, her voice shaking. I know that. I've known it for a very long time. But I didn't realize exactly how badly I'd messed up until it was way too late to fix it. I didn't respond. Just watched her carefully. She continued, tears starting to form in her eyes. You were right about everything. About me. About my motivations. I didn't see you for who you really were. I didn't appreciate you. I took you completely for granted. And I'm so sorry. I looked at her, keeping my expression completely neutral. Okay. She blinked. Clearly surprised. Okay. That's it? That's all you have to say? What do you want me to say, Willow? I asked calmly. That I forgive you. That everything's fine now. That we can just go back to how things were. Because we can't. It's too late for that. Tears started streaming down her face. I know. I just needed you to know that I regret it. All of it. Everything I did. I stayed silent, watching her cry. She wiped her eyes roughly, her voice breaking completely. My dad was right about everything. I've been chasing the wrong things my entire life. Status, power, excitement. And now I've lost absolutely everything that actually mattered. Every single thing that was real. I felt a pang of something deep in my chest. Not quite sympathy. But close. I'm sorry you're hurting, I said carefully, choosing my words. But that's not my responsibility anymore. It hasn't been for a long time. She nodded slowly, tears still streaming down her face. I know it's not. She stood up slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. I hope you're happy, Daniel. You deserve it. You always did. And with that, she turned and walked out of my office, closing the door quietly behind her. For a moment, I just sat there in the silence, staring at the empty doorway. Then I turned back to my work. A few months later, everything came to a dramatic head. Willow had made one too many costly mistakes, and Mr. Carter finally had enough. He called an emergency board meeting. The entire executive team was required to be there, including me, including Willow. The tension in that room was absolutely suffocating. He stood at the head of the long conference table, his expression stern and unyielding. I've made a decision, he announced to everyone. Effective immediately. Willow will be stepping down from her position in this company. The entire room went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Willow's face went deathly pale. Dad, she started to say, her voice shaking, but he held up his hand firmly. This isn't personal, he said coldly. This is business. Pure and simple. You're not ready for this level of responsibility. And until you are, you won't have a place in this company. Period. She looked like she'd been physically slapped across the face. Her eyes darted frantically around the room, finally landing on me. Daniel, she said desperately, her voice breaking. Please. Say something. Do something. I stayed completely silent, my face expressionless. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is because of him, isn't it? She said, pointing directly at me with a shaking finger. You're punishing me because I rejected him, because I didn't choose him when I had the chance. Mr. Carter's expression hardened even more. This has absolutely nothing to do with Daniel. Nothing. Whatsoever. This is about you. About your complete inability to take responsibility for your own actions and decisions. She stared at him, tears streaming down her face, her whole body shaking. Then she turned and stormed out of the conference room, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. The meeting ended shortly after that uncomfortable scene. As everyone slowly filed out, avoiding eye contact, Mr. Carter pulled me aside privately. I'm sorry you had to witness that, he said quietly. I shook my head. It's fine, sir. Really. He looked at me, his expression thoughtful and measuring. You could have defended her just now, spoken up for her. I know, I said simply. But it wasn't my place to do that. He smiled slightly. You're a good man, Daniel. Better than she deserved. I didn't respond to that. Because deep down, I genuinely wasn't sure if that was true or not. Later that same night, long after everyone had gone home, I received a short text message from Willow. I'm leaving. Going abroad for a while. I need to figure things out. Figure out who I am without all of this. I stared at the message on my screen for a very long time, reading it over and over. Then I finally typed out a simple response. Good luck, Willow. I hope you find what you're looking for. And I genuinely meant it. 6 months passed. 6 full months of incredible growth, massive success, and finally finding real peace with myself. The partnership with Mr. Carter flourished beyond anything I could have possibly imagined when we started. I wasn't just working for him anymore, following his orders. I was building alongside him as a true equal. Creating something meaningful. Something real. Something I could actually be proud of. I stopped thinking about Willow every single day. Stopped replaying all our conversations in my head over and over. Stopped wondering what if things had been different. She'd sent a few brief messages over those months. Nothing dramatic or emotional. Just simple updates. She was living in Europe. Taking advanced business courses. Trying to find herself and figure out who she was without her father's company and influence. I responded politely each time but kept my distance. Kept those walls firmly up. Then one ordinary afternoon, Mr. Carter called me into his office with no explanation. Sit down, Daniel, he said, gesturing to the familiar chair. His voice sounded different. Tired. I sat, wondering what this was about. He looked at me for a very long moment, then smiled warmly. I'm stepping down, he said simply. I blinked in complete surprise. What? What do you mean? I'm retiring, he explained. I've spent 40 long years building this company from absolutely nothing, poured my heart and soul into it, and now it's finally time to let someone else take the reins and carry it forward. I didn't know what to say. My mind was racing. He continued, his voice steady and certain. I've thought long and hard about who should take over. Who deserves this responsibility? And I've made my final decision. He slid a thick folder across the desk toward me. Inside were legal documents naming me as the new chief executive officer. Not just a partner anymore. Not just a stakeholder. The person in complete charge. I'm giving you the company, Daniel, he said clearly. Not as an inheritance. Not as a gift. As something you've genuinely earned through your own hard work and dedication. I stared at the documents, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might explode. Sir, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I honestly don't know what to say. Say yes, he said with a genuine smile. I looked up at him, my mind still reeling. What about Willow? What happens to her? He sighed deeply. Willow has been working very hard on herself. She's changed significantly. Grown up. But she's still not ready for this level of responsibility. Maybe someday she will be. But not now. Not yet. I nodded slowly, processing everything. Then I looked him directly in the eye and said the words that would change my entire life forever. I accept. Thank you, sir. For everything. He smiled broadly, reaching across the desk to shake my hand firmly. I knew you would. I never doubted you for a second. The official announcement was made the following week. The response from the business world was absolutely overwhelming. Some people were genuinely thrilled for me. Others were openly skeptical and critical. But I didn't care anymore what anyone thought. I'd earned this position fair and square. And I was ready for whatever came next. Then, one morning, completely out of the blue, Willow came back. I didn't know she was returning to the city until I saw her standing in the lobby of the building. She looked completely different from the last time I'd seen her. Healthier. More put together. There was a confidence about her now, but it wasn't the arrogant, entitled confidence from before. This was different. Earned. She saw me across the lobby and hesitated for just a moment. Then she walked over slowly. Hi, Daniel, she said softly. Hi, I replied simply. She glanced around the impressive lobby, then looked back at me. I heard the news about your promotion. Congratulations. You deserved it. Thanks, I said. I appreciate that. She nodded, biting her lip nervously. I just wanted to say that I'm genuinely proud of you, and that I'm truly sorry. For everything I put you through. I studied her face carefully. She looked completely sincere. I appreciate that, Willow. I really do. She smiled, but it was a small, sad smile. I'm not asking for anything. I'm not here to try to get back into your life or the company. I just wanted you to know how I felt. I nodded slowly. I understand. Take care of yourself, Willow. You too, Daniel, she said quietly, and then she turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. I watched her go, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I didn't feel anything. No anger burning in my chest. No lingering regret. No feelings whatsoever. Just complete and total peace. A few weeks later, I was sitting in my new executive office, looking out over the entire city through those massive windows, when my assistant knocked politely on the door. Sir, she said with a professional smile. There's someone here to see you. She says she's an old friend. Who? I asked curiously. She smiled knowingly. A young woman named Sarah. Walter recommended she come speak with you about a potential business opportunity. I felt my eyebrows raise in surprise. Sarah? We'd gone to college together years ago. She'd been in the same study group as Willow and me. We'd lost complete touch after graduation, but I remembered her very well. Smart. Genuinely kind. Honest to her core. Send her in, I said. The door opened, and Sarah walked in confidently. She looked great. Professional. Successful in her own right. Daniel, she said, smiling warmly. It's been way too long. It really has. I said, standing up to shake her hand properly. What brings you here? She laughed, and it was a genuine, warm sound. I saw your name in the business news and thought I'd reach out. Congratulations. By the way. This is incredible. Thanks, I said, gesturing for her to sit. I appreciate it. We talked for well over an hour. About life. About our careers. About everything that had happened over the years since we'd last seen each other, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt something I hadn't felt in months and months. Hope. Real hope for the future. As she prepared to leave, she turned back at the door and said casually, we should grab coffee sometime. Actually catch up properly. I smiled, and it felt genuine. I'd really like that. A lot. And for the first time in a very long time, I truly believed deep down that everything was actually going to be okay. That my future was bright. Willow had moved on with her life. I had moved on with mine. And the future, for once, looked absolutely bright. Several months later, I heard through the business grapevine that Willow had started her own small company. Something she'd built completely from scratch with her own money and effort. And according to Mr. Carter, who I still met with regularly, she was actually doing quite well. Good for her, I thought when I heard the news. And I genuinely meant it with no bitterness. Because at the end of the day, I didn't want her to fail. I didn't want her to suffer. I just didn't want her in my life anymore. That chapter was closed forever. I'd found my own path forward. My own success on my own terms. My own happiness that I'd built myself. And I'd done it all completely on my own terms. No shortcuts. No handouts. No compromises. Whatsoever. Just pure hard work, unwavering integrity, and the absolute refusal to settle for anything less than I truly deserved. And that, more than any inheritance or any relationship could ever be, was the greatest victory of all. Sarah and I started seeing each other regularly. Coffee dates turned into dinner dates. Dinner dates turned into weekend trips. And slowly, carefully, something real started to build between us. Something genuine and honest. Something I'd never really had before. Mr. Carter noticed, of course. He always noticed everything. "You look happy, Daniel," he said to me one afternoon. "Really happy." "I am," I replied honestly. "For the first time in a long time, I really am." He smiled warmly. "Good. You deserve it. You always did." And as I sat in my office that evening, watching the sun set over the city I now helped run, I realized something important. Declining that inheritance had been the best decision I'd ever made. Not because of the money I'd walked away from, but because it had forced me to prove to myself what I was actually worth, what I could actually achieve on my own. And that was worth more than any amount of money could ever be.